Hello everyone, hope you all are doing well. Welcome to Diplomat's Desk. I am your host Meet Shah. What if I told you that today in 2025 NATO quietly wants India closer than ever, but India still refuses? What if I told you that behind closed doors Western diplomats regularly debates India's role in the next global security order and India keeps them guessing? And here's the strangest part. This tension did not start today. It began 75 years ago with a decision that shaped India's destiny. So the real question is not just why did India never join NATO? The real question is why does NATO want India today and why is India still hesitant? Let's unpack the past, the present, and the hidden strategy that explains everything. So, why NATO wanted India in the first place? Let's go back to 1949. NATO was born as the world's strongest military alliance led by the United States, designed to contain the Soviet Union. Inside US strategic circles, influential policymakers like George Kennan argued that India could become the democratic anchor of Asia. Early US think tanks even floated the idea of Pacific NATO with India as its centerpiece. Why? Because India was a massive democracy, sitting next to China, geographically critical for sea routes, a symbolic counterweight to communism. In Western imagination, India looked like the perfect Asian ally. But they misread India completely because India had no interest in being anyone's pawn. Why India said no? The logic of strategic autonomy. Here is the golden rule that drives every Indian policy decision. Never outsource national security. Never enter someone else's war. Never lose control of your own destiny. This is what Nehru called non-alignment. But let's be clear. Non-alignment was not neutrality. It was power strategy. If India joined NATO in 1950s, India would automatically enter the Cold War. Article 5 would force India into conflicts from Europe to the Middle East. India could not talk to both superpowers. India would become dependent on Western military systems. And most importantly, India would lose its freedom to say no. For a newly independent nation, that was non-negotiable. So now the Russia factor, the red line NATO could not cross. Now let's get into the deepest strategic reason. The Soviet Union became India's most reliable partner from the 1960s to 1990s. This partnership was not sentimental, it was a survival. In 1971, Moscow supported India in the Bangladesh Liberation War. The USSR vetoed anti-India UN resolutions on Kashmir. It supplied aircrafts, submarines, and weapons no one else would. India built decades of defense capability on Soviet platforms. Even today, more than half of India's military hardware is Russian origin. If India joined NATO, Moscow would have cut off defense supplies. India's 1971 victory might not have happened. India would lose strategic depth. NATO membership was not just unappealing for India, it was strategically dangerous. Now, the China equation, India's real strategic problem. Let's be brutally honest, India's long term challenge has always been China, not Europe. A 3,440 kilometers border, a 1962 war, decades of rivalry, two rising Asian giants competing for influence. If India joined NATO, China would fully align with the Soviet Union decades earlier. India would be seen as a Western proxy. India would lose diplomatic flexibility in Asia. The border would become a Cold War frontline. China's rise changed the global balance, but India's strategy stayed consistent. Manage China with flexibility, not alliances. Keep options open, not closed. Avoid turning rivalry into dependency. This is diplomacy 101, but very few countries have the disciplines to execute it. India did. Now, the most complication is the Pakistan. Here's the twist people forgot. Pakistan did not join Western alliances. It was part of NATO, CENTO, and becomes a major non-NATO US ally. The West armed Pakistan during the Cold War. So imagine India joining NATO while Pakistan was already receiving American weapons. Diplomatic chaos. Add to that, Turkey is NATO member that strongly support Pakistan on Kashmir. NATO's internal politics would undermine India's interest. India would never join an alliance structure that strengthens Pakistan leverage. This alone made NATO unrealistic. Here is the simplest reason India never joined NATO. NATO requires automatic war commitments. India rejects automatic commitments. NATO requires coordinate foreign bases. India rejects foreign bases. NATO requires alignment with Western strategy. India aligns only with Indian strategy. This is why India prefers Quad, I2U2, logistic partnerships, defense collaborations without binding treaties. India's message is clear: partnership, yes; alliances, no. Now, why NATO wants India today? NATO today is looking east. China is now listed as a systematic challenge in NATO communiques, and who sits at the heart of Indo-Pacific India. Here's why NATO wants India is because of China's rise. NATO sees India as the only Asian democracy with the scale to balance China. Indo-Pacific strategy: France, the UK, the US wants India integrated into a broader security architecture. Russia-Ukraine war: NATO hopes India will reduce dependence on Russian arms. Technology and cyber defense: India is becoming a major tech space in cyber power. NATO wants interoperability. Diplomatic credibility: India is trusted by both the West and the global South, a rare position. To put it simply, NATO needs India more than today at any point of time in history. But here's the twist: India still hesitates. Why India is still hesitating is: first, autonomy is non negotiable. India won't sign Article 5 obligations, period. Second, Russia remains indispensable. In defense, nuclear cooperation, space, India still needs Russia. Third, China border realities. India faces daily military tension with China. It needs flexibility, not rigid alliances. Fourth, global South leadership. Joining NATO damages India's credibility as a bridge between East and West. Fifth, identity. India does not see itself as a Western ally. It sees itself as an independent civilizational power. So NATO may want India, but India wants option, not obligations. Now, what if India had joined NATO? This is where the counterfactual becomes very interesting. If India joined NATO, India would have been pulled into Iraq, Libya, Afghanistan, lost Russian military support, faced a hostile China decades earlier, lost its leadership in the global south, become dependent on Western defense ecosystem. But India would have gained earlier access to Western weapons, stronger European partnerships, larger global political influence, but as an ally, not an equal. In short, India might have grown faster, but it wouldn't have grown independent. Now, to conclude this, India's strategy neither east nor west. So here is the real answer. India never joined NATO because India has always chosen sovereignty over alignment. India is not interested in picking sides. India is interested in setting the terms. And today, in a world where China is rising, Russia is fighting a war, and the West is recalibrating, NATO wants India more than ever. But India chooses partnership, not alliances; flexibility, not dependency; autonomy, not obligations. India is not East, India is not West, India is India, and the world must work with that. So, what do you think? Should India stay outside alliances forever? Or will India one day consider a NATO style security arrangement? Tell me your thoughts in the comments. And if you want a full breakdown of why India will never join Quad as a military alliance, let me know. I'll make that next. See you in the next one.